Imagine waking up to a strange gurgling sound outside your window. You peer through the blinds, only to see water rushing through your yard, swallowing your newly planted flowers in the blink of an eye. Your heart pounds. This is no simple leak. And then you spot the cause, a pair of garden shears lying abandoned in the mud, like a weapon left behind at a crime scene. That's exactly what happened to me, David, in the quiet neighborhood of East Creek Estate. Little did I know that this single act of vandalism, seemingly small and trivial, would set off a chain reaction. The person behind it? Karen South, the new HOA president who believed winter brown grass was the worst sin imaginable. By the end of this story, you'll see how Karen's obsession triggered one of the worst floods in our community's history and uncovered years of illegal construction cover-ups. But that's not all. What we discovered beneath the soggy ground would shock even the local government, lead to arrests, and expose horrifying secrets that had festered just below the surface. Stay with me, because nothing in East Creek Estate will ever be the same again, and once you see the final twist, you'll understand why. Before we dive into the unexpected twists and jaw-dropping secrets, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a moment of this unbelievable story. Also, drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. It truly means a lot to this budding channel, and I can't wait to hear about your own crazy HOA experiences. I'd lived in East Creek Estate for about 5 years. It was a quiet place, rolling hills, tall trees, a small creek that cut through the neighborhood, and a shared appreciation for natural landscapes. Most folks followed the HOA guidelines out of habit. Sure, we had the usual rules about lawns, fences, and mailboxes, but nothing too extreme. But then Karen South moved in. She was a real estate agent who wanted everything to appear perfect all the time. The grass needed to be green year-round. The houses needed to match her personal vision of suburban paradise. When she joined the board, everyone just assumed she'd bring fresh ideas. We had no clue we'd open the door to a controlling tyrant. Karen didn't waste time pushing her agenda at the first HOA board meeting she attended. According to Robert's Rules of Order, we needed majority votes to table or pass motions, but Karen seemed to skip that procedure constantly. She'd stand at the front of the room, without even being officially named president yet, and speak like she was in charge. She clicked through a PowerPoint showing close-up pictures of lawns that dared to turn brown in winter, including mine. She labeled them unacceptable vegetation. To her, the concept of winter dormancy was foreign. No matter how many experts explained that certain grasses go brown naturally and bounce back in spring, she refused to listen. I'm David, and I work as a landscape consultant. I help the city with water management projects, especially in neighborhoods that want eco-friendly solutions. So, it's part of my job to know about grass cycles, drainage, and how to keep a yard healthy without overusing water. When Karen kept blaming brown grass on neglect, I raised my hand. Actually, I said calmly, winter dormancy can protect grass from frost damage. It also... Karen slammed the clicker on the table. I have decades of real estate experience. I know what looks good and what lowers property value. Brown grass in winter is an eyesore. I glanced around, hoping the other board members would speak. Some nodded at me, but Karen took the floor again. Next item, she snapped, ignoring any attempt at discussion. As we left the meeting, my neighbor Ava whispered, "She sure is on a power trip." I shrugged, trying to be optimistic. Maybe Karen was just overzealous, but deep down, I sensed trouble. When someone steamrolls basic voting rules at a meeting, it's a bad sign. Ava sighed. Well, if she tries to find me over dead leaves, I'm going to lose it. What we didn't realize was that Karen had no plans to follow standard procedures. She was about to rewrite rules on the fly, ignoring votes, and she'd do it with a terrifying smile. That night, I stepped outside, inhaling the crisp winter air. Normally, I found it peaceful, but an unsettling hush draped the street. Where was everyone? Usually, you'd see neighbors walking dogs or kids playing in driveways. Instead, the place felt empty. Probably just the cold, I muttered. But goosebumps crawled over my arms. Something was off. Little did I know my life in East Creek Estate was about to become the center of a raging storm, both literally and figuratively. I woke up to an official-looking letter taped to my door, HOA Compliance Notice. Inside, it claimed I was in violation for letting my grass appear brown and patchy, demanding immediate correction. Failure to comply meant daily fines. The weird part was that it cited brand new regulations, ones nobody had voted on at the last meeting. That can't be right, I thought, flipping through the letter. The date at the top was from the night before. Karen must have typed this up herself. I decided to check with the board's actual president, Jim, a longtime resident. But guess what? Karen had apparently taken over. Jim had stepped down due to health issues, though no one had heard of him being sick. A few days later, neighbor after neighbor complained of similar letters. Leo, down the street, was ordered to remove native plants labeled as weeds. Bella was fined for storing rainwater in a barrel by her garden. Karen's reasoning? Unapproved containers, Bella raged. The city recommended these barrels. They were free from the local water conservation program. Karen didn't listen. She'd stand on people's lawns, snapping photos for evidence, ignoring protests. Some folks argued with her, but she always had that condescending smirk, dropping phrases like, "I'm only enforcing policy," or "We must preserve property values, sweetie." I decided to install a smart irrigation system. This device used weather data to water only when needed, preventing waste. It was perfect for winter, as it barely ran in cold months. The entire city was encouraging such systems. Yet, Karen disapproved. "That's running outside the approved hours," she barked, cornering me one afternoon. "I heard water at 3 a.m. "Yes, because it's more efficient," I calmly explained. "The system measures the soil dryness. It only waters if the ground is too dry." She thrust a piece of paper at me. HOA Policy 3.1, no sprinklers after midnight. I read it. It looked suspiciously new. "This was never in the bylaws." She shrugged, crossing her arms. "It was tabled. After the last meeting, nobody objected, so I considered it approved." I rolled my eyes. That's not how Robert's rules work. Tabled items aren't automatically approved, but she seemed determined to rewrite the process. Meanwhile, my neighbors approached me, asking how they could fight back. Yet some felt too intimidated to speak up. Right around this time, people noticed a strange brown tint to the water in some sections of East Creek Estate. It didn't smell bad, but it stained sidewalks and made lawns look sickly. The local property management team promised to investigate, but weeks passed and nobody came. One neighbor, Rick, complained that his gutters were clogged with this gunky residue. Water overflowed, damaging his siding. "I've asked for help since last spring," he fumed, "and they won't do anything." That's when I realized something bigger might be going on. We were all so focused on Karen's new rules that we overlooked a deeper problem: the aging infrastructure of East Creek Estate. Something in the water system or drainage lines was messed up, and if left unchecked, it could cause serious damage. One evening, I decided to do some research. I hopped onto the county's public records site, searching for information on East Creek Estate. That's when I found a name on old construction permits: Karen R. South. She wasn't just some random real estate agent. She had ties to the original development of East Creek Estate decades ago. Confused, I dug deeper. Karen had apparently been involved in property deals where corners were cut on drainage installations. Those records had disclaimers about hillside stability and water lines that never got properly addressed. Suddenly, it clicked. Maybe Karen wanted to force everyone to keep lawns extra green so nobody would notice the bigger issues with the water infrastructure. Because if the truth came out, it could unravel old secrets and possibly cost her a fortune. Armed with my new discovery, I showed up at the next HOA meeting. People questioned if Karen had the authority to run it, but she insisted. The board members looked uneasy. Karen hammered the gavel like she was a judge. "We'll handle lawn violations first," she declared. I stood up. "Before that, Karen, I found your name on the development records. Care to explain your involvement?" A hush fell. Karen's eyes narrowed. She shrugged. "So what? I have a real estate background. Everyone knows that." "Then you know about the outdated drainage pipes," I pressed, "and the mandatory updates that were never done." The room erupted into murmurs. Some residents demanded to see the documents. Karen tried to deflect, claiming we were all misinformed. "Your so-called findings are from decades ago, sweetie. Times have changed." Tension soared. One resident, Mia, asked if we could table the entire matter for a formal vote, following actual procedure. Karen refused. "I have the power to act in emergency situations," she declared. "We can't let these baseless rumors undermine our property values." Then, in a move that shocked everyone, Karen announced a brand new policy: mandatory 24/7 sprinklers for all brown lawns until they turned green. People gasped. Nonstop watering was not only expensive, but also environmentally reckless. I tried to speak, but she slammed the gavel. "Meeting adjourned." The next evening, I got an alert on my phone from my security camera. Motion detected in my side yard. Switching to live view, I saw Karen standing there with a large pair of garden shears. She looked furious, muttering about violations and unapproved irrigation. My heart pounded. Is she seriously going to tamper with my sprinkler system? I grabbed my phone and rushed outside. The moment I stepped onto the grass, I heard the snip, snip, snip of those shears cutting through a main supply line. Water gushed out, spraying across the yard. "Karen!" I yelled. "Stop! You have no right to destroy private property." She whirled around, eyes blazing. "I'm enforcing HOA rules, David. Your system was running at 3 a.m. again." "That's by design," I said, trying to keep calm. "It waters during cooler hours." Before I could finish, she sliced again. Another line snapped, unleashing more water. My property sat on a gentle slope leading to a creek. Water from the cut lines poured directly into the hillside, faster than the ground could absorb. Suddenly, the earth began to tremble beneath our feet. I stared in horror as a small mudslide formed, rolling down the slope. The noise was like a wet roar, punctuated by loud cracks of uprooted bushes and fence posts. Panicking, I grabbed Karen's arm. "We have to get back. The whole slope's going to collapse." Karen yanked free, stumbling backwards, screaming. "This is your fault, David," she shrieked, but her face said otherwise. She was terrified. Emergency crews arrived in record time, lights flashing, but as they worked, something even more terrifying emerged. Part of the hillside caved in, revealing a massive concrete chamber. It looked like an old abandoned underground storage vault that no one knew was there. Water rushed in, filling this hidden space, then shooting out from broken seams. Officials stared, baffled. "What is this place?" the fire chief asked, shining a flashlight into the dark chamber. Rusty pipes and half-built walls told a grim tale. The developers had built a secret substructure, then buried it without proper reinforcement. This was likely done to cut costs and hide liabilities, and from the look on Karen's face, she knew exactly what we had found. With water pouring into the secret chamber, the hillside became dangerously unstable. The fire department and local officials ordered an immediate evacuation of nearby homes. Ava, Rick, and others fled as the mud crept closer to their properties. Some were in tears, terrified they'd lose everything. Karen, still wearing her HOA badge, a lanyard she had made for herself, tried to slink away, but one of the police officers stopped her. "We need a statement, ma'am. You were seen tampering with the irrigation system." She scoffed. "I was only doing my job. The real problem is the cheap construction, not me." A utility supervisor overheard. "And who handled real estate for East Creek Estate when it was built?" While the hillside collapsed further, local engineers used ground-penetrating radar. They discovered entire sections of East Creek Estate were built on questionable fill materials. Some drainage systems were never finished. Others were installed incorrectly. The official records had been doctored to pass inspections. Neighbors muttered, "Wait, so we've had a ticking time bomb under our yards for years?" The answer, heartbreakingly, was yes. But it got worse when the city realized Karen had repeatedly blocked efforts to modernize the estate's water systems, possibly to avoid exposing these secrets. As the investigation ramped up, Karen's nice facade vanished. She stormed around, screaming at the utility workers. "I'm the HOA president. You can't just dig up our property." But they ignored her. They had search warrants from the city, citing public safety concerns. People stared, speechless, as she shoved official documents out of the way, ignoring how dangerous the situation was. She called everyone incompetent and lazy, acting more unhinged by the minute. An emergency HOA meeting was called in a nearby school gym, since our community center was too close to the mudslide. Most of the real board members were present, including Mia and Leo, who tried to restore order using Robert's rules. But Karen kept shouting, slamming her fists on tables. Residents demanded answers about the secret chamber, the missing drainage, and the damaged properties. Karen tried to deflect. If you had just kept your lawns green, none of this would have happened, people booed. One man shouted, "You're the reason my walls are disintegrating from blocked gutters." Another demanded, "I asked for drainage fixes a year ago and got no response. What can I do now?" Through all this, Karen just sneered, "That's not my problem." It was a shocking level of entitlement and cruelty. With the hidden chamber now partially flooded, engineers warned that a full hillside collapse was possible. The city installed temporary barriers, but water seeped around them. Entire trees slid downhill. Some houses developed cracks in their foundations. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. My yard looked like a swamp, and I worried about the structural integrity of my own home. The city declared certain zones off-limits, red-tagging properties. Bella's treasured garden was destroyed by the surge of water and debris. In the midst of this chaos, I teamed up with a small group of neighbors, Ava, Rick, Bella, and Terrence, to gather evidence. We wanted to hold Karen and any other culprits responsible. With help from the local government's property management office, we found old photos, memos, and more suspicious documents. Each new piece reinforced the same conclusion. The developer cut corners long ago, and Karen had knowledge of it. The darkest rumor? Karen had personally signed off on certain hidden modifications. Now that the secrets were out, she was more determined than ever to shift blame onto others. Out of nowhere, Jesse, a retired structural engineer living 3 streets over, emerged with a box of old notebooks. She'd been at the original city hearing about the East Creek project. Karen testified back then about property values, Jesse said. She assured the council that the drainage was top-notch. Jesse's notebooks had diagrams, official stamps, and letters from county officials. She must have known this place was a ticking time bomb, Jesse concluded sadly. One late afternoon, a piece of the hillside actually broke free, crashing into the creek below. Everyone watched in horror as muddy water threatened to overflow into backyards. Helicopters circled overhead, filming the devastation. News vans arrived, setting up cameras. This story was no longer local gossip. It was making headlines statewide. Karen, forced to face the media, tried to look composed, but her voice wavered. She repeated, "I did everything right. This is sabotage by unscrupulous homeowners." The reporters didn't buy it. Word reached the state real estate board about the fiasco. They launched an official probe examining how East Creek Estate was developed, who approved the plans, and why. Investigators poured into our neighborhood like a swarm of bees, combing through old land surveys. Karen was grilled for hours. She emerged from the courthouse, hair disheveled, refusing to speak to reporters. The board suspended her real estate license pending the investigation, effectively shutting down her livelihood. A community meeting was held in the local high school auditorium, our largest gathering yet. With cameras rolling, Karen walked in like she still owned the place. Despite her license suspension, she demanded everyone respect her authorities as HOA President. People groaned. Leo tried to calmly explain that an official re-election had been scheduled by the board. Karen declared, "No one's removing me from power." She ranted about conspiracies, claiming I bribed the city for my eco-friendly irrigation ideas. She accused me of orchestrating the mudslide. In that moment, the crowd looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Then came the bombshell. An investigator revealed that Karen had not just known about the hidden chamber, she had helped design it. According to newly discovered emails, she collaborated with the original developer to store building materials in an underground vault, skip certain safety measures, and then bury it. Over the years, the structure weakened until the massive water surge turned it into a collapse zone. Karen's face went pale. She tried to interrupt. "That's a lie." But the emails with her signature were displayed on a projector for all to see. The hush that fell over the auditorium was deafening. Police officers stepped in. They'd already spoken to the district attorney, who found enough evidence for an immediate arrest. Handcuffs clicked around Karen's wrists as she shrieked at the top of her lungs. "I did this for the good of East Creek Estate. You're all ungrateful." But the final straw was captured on live news coverage. She tried kicking one of the officers, screaming expletives. Cameras flashed. Reporters fired questions. Neighbors gasped. The unstoppable Karen South, brought down by her own lies. News eventually broke that Karen faced multiple felony charges, including fraud and reckless endangerment. She tried to spin a sob story to the judge, claiming she only wanted to preserve property values. But with all the evidence piled high, no one believed her. She lost her home in a lawsuit, her assets depleted by legal fees. Neighbors whispered that she moved out of state after the trial. Some said they spotted her loading a moving van late at night, skulking away with her ego in tatters. Standing on my porch one evening, I remembered that night I first saw Karen with those garden shears. If she hadn't tried to sabotage my irrigation, maybe the hidden chamber and the flawed construction would have remained buried for years. But in the end, exposing the truth saved East Creek Estate from an even worse disaster down the line. Sometimes the biggest storms tear down more than just trees and fences. They reveal the rot underneath. And once that rot is brought to light, real healing can begin.